I'm Randy Altman with Post Perspective. We're here at NAB, it's day 2, NAB 2019. I'm here with Nick Anderson from DigitalGlue, who also runs CreativeSpace, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about that in a moment. So first, why don't we start off with what is DigitalGlue and how did CreativeSpace evolve from that?
Yeah, so DigitalGlue is a glass-to-glass systems integrator, basically from like the glass of the camera lens all the way to the glass of the screen. We started off doing mostly broadcast satellite distribution. Our founders came from the satellite company, and so then basically the company emerged out of basically customers coming back to them and saying, hey, we actually want encoders, things like that. It's funny, they actually were going to go into content creation. They were going to be making a content network for like surf, skate, snow shops. That's why originally we were TBC integration, so
right.
It's the board channel integration, which is just to write the first check. But that evolved then into DigitalGlue because we had a software development division that really became a big source of revenue for us, where companies would come in and they'd have different solutions, hardware, things that they'd buy from resellers, but then it didn't all quite work together. Features were advertised, but they weren't functional. Mm-hmm. And so we basically had to figure out the APIs and go into these systems to make that work. And so DigitalGlue then eventually just became the overall company name, and we transitioned to that kind of as a whole. And so then CreativeSpace
which is on-premises storage.
Yeah, so on-premise managed storage. We're now starting to call it managed storage for creatives because we can both do on-premise and in the cloud.
Okay.
So really, the cloud instance of it is not really so much when you think of traditional cloud of, it's just a bunch of, your files are somewhere in the cloud, you don't quite know where they are. For us, we don't really like that concept because you don't know where your data is, you don't know how to get it back. And so when we do cloud solutions, we try to figure out like recovery plans, retention plans for like what happens if there's an outage at this data center, because the first thing that's going to happen is they're not going to take your call. Yeah. Until it's back up, you're not going to get through to them. Yeah. So we can have guys actually go over to the facility, grab out your hardware, put it in another data center, or just bring it back to you and load it up. So while it is more expensive, really we're trying to equalize basically what you're paying for with what's on the back end, so you really know what you're paying for and how you're going to use it.
So when you work with a customer, what are the questions that you ask them, and how do you make sure that you're setting them up with the right? Because you guys, why don't you talk about the different offerings that you have, because you have a whole line of product.
Yeah. So I wish I could say that we've tried to put together kind of like these lists of, okay, just ask these questions, you'll get the answers. But the problem is that really our job is to translate from the customer what is they actually need, and so it's less of a conversation of what storage do you need, right? Because a lot of time if you're talking to a storage vendor, they're going to say, oh, how many streams, right? Or how many users, and all these questions. But for us, it's really about figuring out, what is your overall workflow and what are the personalities of the people involved, right? We don't want to, I have a lot of experience putting in storage and asset management solutions, things like that. And the unfortunate reality is that unless the people own the solutions and they have their own way of working with them, they don't really end up getting used, and they just become expensive, paperweights if you see them in the office. Yeah. So really it's kind of like being a fly on the wall and figuring out for these companies how they actually work and how they will actually operate in these constraints of the environment, and then adapting the storage and the overall workflow for that. Not just the storage. Storage is really just the middle of it, but the entire workflow, and then keeping a conversation going with them to figure out, okay, now you've added some more users, or you're trying to do this unique file format. Okay, how do we actually adapt the storage to do that and provide not just, oh, hey, buy this new thing and it'll work, but okay, you can either reuse your existing assets like this, and here's a potential workflow, or here's a, if you want to upgrade, kind of like a good, better, best type scenario, so they can make a strategic decision on it.
Okay, and you sort of speak their language. You come from a post-production background, so that's got to make it easier. You're probably thinking the way that they're thinking.
That's pretty much like, for me, the way I approach all this is really like going against what a lot of vendors do, because like I've been coming to NAB since I was 16. And so basically going into all these, events and talks, like the SMPTE conference that they always do beforehand, I would go to those, talk to vendors, and try to figure out why are these things that I feel like should work this way or that way don't work like that, or what if you did this feature? And then a lot of time the answer is, oh yeah, we have that. Look here. Yeah. Look, there's a sentence and it says that's the feature. Isn't that great? We do that. Oh, and these guys already do that. Why would we do that? But really, it's about actually making it practical for an end user to use the software and do the things they do. It doesn't matter that it can do it, it's can they do it, and can you do it without understanding a whole new language of how you got to think about it, right? No one wants to have to learn a whole new language in order to use an application, and that's kind of how a lot of these vendors work. Is here's this giant manual. Okay, here you go. Good luck.
Yeah, no one has time for that anymore.
Right,
they just want to get it set up and start working and creating.
Right.
So that's a big deal.
So,
your website is pretty clear about your different product lines. Why don't you point people to the site so they can find out more? And before you do that, did I leave anything out? Anything that I missed?
Just the software that we're going to be releasing. I guess
What's
So I guess first off, just creative.space is the website. So literally creative.space company, or it's the name and the website. But yeah, we've got software that we're getting ready to release. Unfortunately, it's not ready for this show. It's one of the things that goes along with, the way we're approaching software. Is, we look at it like similar to how like Steve Jobs had, the iPhone, right? You had, screen, you had all the computer parts inside, right? So CPU, RAM, all these things. And if you just look at it then nobody's going to use it. But it's about what's on that screen, how people are going to use it that matters. And so really we've looked at kind of stripping apart what do people use storage for, how does it work on the back end, and rather than focusing on kind of adapting legacy architectures to work with these new technologies, basically we've actually gone and looked at things like user management and how you structure your folder templates, things like that. And we're going to have all that up on the website soon. So that is coming out. Early adopters can get that software, and I'm not going into we'll have the information on there. I don't want to bore you all with that.
But it's all on the site, and if they want to learn more about it, they can do that.
But ultimately, it's really about figuring out what are these core things that are simple that people actually need to do, without a lot of complexity, and then the early adopter program is about really customizing the software for individual users. So we're not saying like, here's the software, go use this. We're really wanting to have people come to us and say, okay, yeah, I like that, but I wish it worked like this. And we can, because we have our in-house software development team, and it's easy for us to adapt on the fly to things, really we can, any workflow that a customer has that they can think of, we could probably make that happen as an early adopter, and it's not going to be a giant, individual software development project, because we're going to be acting like other customers in this scenario and saying, okay, well, what if that and what if this? And figuring out, okay, how do we get to a solution that now we can take to the larger market and have it be interoperable between people.
So they don't have to adapt to your way. You adapt to their way.
Right, we always adapt to their way. That's the whole thing, yeah.
Okay, well that's very cool.
Yeah.
Nick, thanks for stopping by and telling us a bit about CreativeSpace. I'm Randy Altman with Post Perspective. This is Nick Anderson from CreativeSpace DigitalGlue, NAB 2019.